Hey guys, welcome back for another video. Today I'm going to be retouching this beautiful photo of Sophie. So Sophie is a model that I use quite a lot through Tiny Tease management. First thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to duplicate the background layer twice because I want to make sure if I mess it up I definitely have a backup. I then go onto the top layer and press onto Gaussian blur, or however you pronounce it, and I use the healing brush tool just to use patches of skin to basically make the skin look as smooth as possible. It is important that you don't just use one patch of skin because there are highlights, there are shadows, there are areas where the tone or the texture is slightly different. So with this, I just kind of concentrated on making sure I was getting loads of different pieces of the face and making sure I wasn't just using the same one over and over and over again. So I would layer it quite a lot. Here I'm just kind of getting rid of the blemishes and the spots and trying to also add in some natural sort of highlight. I did use the arm, I think, for this because the arm was in super direct sunlight and I wanted to give her a little bit of highlight on the sort of tip of her nose and the brow area and just under the eye bags as well, on either side of the bridge of the nose. Now here you can notice that there is a sort of red blemish on Sophie's nose, but that is a permanent feature of her face, so I didn't want to remove it because it's part of what makes Sophie beautiful and it's what makes Sophie her. So I kept that part in and I was basically just trying over and over again to smooth out the lines from the eye bags. And the reason for this is, like I said, I do want to make everything as natural as possible, but any harsh lines on the skin, whether it's like a sort of way that the skin folds, not necessarily a wrinkle, because I mean Sophie's only like a 17 in this picture or something like that, the shading here and the lines, I just wanted to blend and smoothly sort of adjust to different shades of the skin. And I continued to do this for quite a while. Actually, watching it back, it is 4 times speed and I'm just kind of comparing the before and the after. Now what I do is I create a mask layer because it's blurry and I don't want the skin to be blurry, and I change it over to white and just fill in the face again. So you can see there it adds all of the adjustments that I've just made, and I'll leave out the eyes and the eyebrows, the lips and the teeth, and you can see on the mask layer almost everything else is black. So here I'm just going back over in black and making sure I'm including the eyes, the eyeballs and also the eyebrows to make sure I'm not losing any detail. I do not want any of that part to be blurry, and I'm just going through the edges of the hair. I do sort of play around with the hardness of the brush because sometimes it looks a bit odd if you do 100% hardness, and again I'm just comparing it. And now I start to bring the opacity down. You can see the before and after there. The next thing I do is just go over the hard lines of the outline of the eye, the nostril, the eyebrows, the lips and the teeth, and then I just put that into a folder and that'll become my first retouch. I then go through and just label everything to try and clear it up for you. So I've got 2 copies, I've got the original and I've got the backup. Now what I do is I just bring the opacity down a little bit because obviously no one's skin is completely smooth and flawless. Yeah, I'm just comparing now how it looks because I don't want it, like I said in my previous video, a lot of my retouching is very, very natural. So I don't like to make it look super obvious. A lot of the adjustments that I'll be doing today go with the theme of natural retouching. So I make another copy of the original and this time I put it underneath my first retouching layer. And the reason for that is because I want to keep the sort of smoothed out face, but this time I'm removing all of the big blemishes. So things that you could see when I brought the opacity down. And again, I'm just turning on and off the layers. I do sometimes use the clone stamp quite a lot. With faces and with portrait shoots, I do tend to use the healing brush more. Yeah, what was I doing here? So here I was just going over my layer mask and sort of softening the transition, blurred to not blurred. And there you just saw that I merged the layers. So I took both my layer 1 copy and my original copy, and those 2 layers are the only ones I've done adjustments on. I've basically just merged them because I know that together they look how I want them to. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I've duplicated that first retouch layer. So this is a clone of the fixes that I've done so far, and I'm creating a second retouch. So here I create a new layer, and over the top I get the lasso tool and I paint a little section in the middle black. and that is to be the pupil, so you can see the difference there. I do a mixture of things. Sometimes I'll put a white brush on, and this will be the highlight, and then after it I go filter, Gaussian blur to fade it out, and then I'll go overlay and bring the opacity down to something that I'm happy with. It is very important to note that every layer I do is separate, so don't forget to check that you're definitely creating a new layer. And here I'm just adding in different color. So I'm not adding in a color that Sophie doesn't have. I'm just bringing out the orange and green and sort of yellow hues that are already in her iris. Again, I'm just doing, that's where I made the mistake there. So just again, make sure you're on a separate layer entirely. Do a Gaussian blur, and then I do some sort of overlay, and then I'll bring that opacity down. And then it was a bit too orange. I didn't get the color right, so I'm just adjusting it via image adjustments, hue and saturation. And now I'll go on to the sort of green section of the iris, lasso tool, brush, pick my green color, paint over the top of it, like so. Again, on a new layer, do a Gaussian blur, and then adjust it to how I would like. So I love the color of that, but it's just not quite as natural as I wanted it. It's a bit too far from what Sophie's eye was, so I just adjusted it via the hue and saturation. Now I'm just taking a look to see what it looks like from when you zoom out, because you can get a different opinion entirely. And I was just seeing what the adjustments looked like, making sure it wasn't anything too severe. Later on I do go to change the iris and make it a little bit smaller because it is a bit too large at the moment. Here I use the white brush and I put it on a big brush size, and I put the harshness down so you can get a sort of fade. I want the white to stand out a bit more because her eye doesn't stand out at the moment, but that is too much, so I bring the opacity down. You don't want to bring the whites of the eyes to a level where it's almost impossibly white, because no one has bright white eyes, and like no one has bright white teeth, and I don't think you can whiten your eyeballs, so just keep them toned down, buddy. Now I'm going around the edge of the iris and making sure that black ring is a bit more obvious. I'm having a bit of a play around with this one because I couldn't decide whether I wanted to keep the black thing in. I think I did end up deleting it. It just sort of made it look too unnatural, and it's not all black. You can see there's sort of an overlap with the color and everything, and now I'm just adding some more detail color in, this time with the pencil tool, again on a new layer, and I add a very slight Gaussian blur, and then choose some sort of overlay on top, and then change the opacity. Throughout this process, I continue to zoom in and out just to make sure it doesn't look too fake, and I want to make sure that it looks, like I said, natural. So I do zoom out, zoom in, turn off the layers, turn off the adjustments one by one, and have a bit of a play around. Don't be afraid to mess up, because if you do everything on a new layer, you can always just delete that one layer and go back, and you haven't lost much progress. So with this one, I was just adding in more green details, and you can see I've done quite a lot to the eye, but when you zoom out, you actually can't tell there's that much of a difference. Yeah, I really like the way that looks. Now, I'm not doing anything to the left eye, I'm only doing editing to the right eye, and the reason for that is because I was on a very small focal point. I think I was shooting on f3.2 or something, so her right eye, or the one to the left in this picture, is slightly blurred anyway. So here I'm happy with the eye, and now I'm moving on to another layer of details. This detail is to outline shapes and shadows to bring definition that isn't necessarily there. I like to bring quite a lot of definition to like the nostril, so it doesn't look too light, but also you don't want it to look too dark, otherwise it looks like some sort of black hole void in someone's nostril. I was having a bit of a mess around with this shape as well, but I just don't think it looked quite right. I think I ended up deleting that one as well. I'm not sure, maybe you'll find out in 10 seconds or so. This edit in total took me about an hour, so it did take a significant amount of time, but to me, I think this kind of thing is always worth it, just to bring your photos up to a sort of retouched, a sort of editorial high fashion look. Now, with my photography personally, I have a grain over this already, so the raw image looks a lot sharper, but I just love having grain in my photos. It just is a texture that I really, really like personally, so that is why it might not be as clear, or the clarity might not be as high in the photos, just purely because I've added a grain. I was also adding in some pencil marks with the eyebrow there, again just colour matching to make sure I wasn't going to be doing some really weird colour that didn't fit with the rest of the image. And eventually I found out that I didn't like the colour of Sophie's lips. That is not Sophie's fault. I did something in Photoshop, I did something in Lightroom. I have no idea what I did, but I made them go a weird like rosy pink colour. It took me about 10-15 minutes to fix that alone. I'm basically getting a lot of different layers and getting the lasso tool, bringing lots of different colours and highlights, and I'm extending the sort of natural cracks that are already in Sophie's lips. You can see those easier if you turn your layers opacity down, because then you can see the actual image below. So I just stroked them in with the pencil tool and made sure I was picking the colours that I was from the same area that I was going to be adjusting. And again, I did a Gaussian blur, and I knew that this didn't look quite right because there was no sort of shadowing or anything. So I needed to bring in some more shadowing on Sophie's lips to make sure it didn't look too sort of stand outish. And I ended up layering quite a lot of things with the lasso tool and the paintbrush, adding in different colours and then sort of blurring them, using the smudge tool, and using the opacity, the overlay, and the Gaussian blur. Yeah, this actually took such a long time. I kind of didn't realise how long it took. I did a massive blur with this one as well, I think, and ended up having to erase around the teeth and the lips because it just spread out like crazy big, crazy wide. And I'm just zooming in and out again to turn the layers on and off. And I noticed here that there should be a highlight, so I add a very light colour and then blur that, and that's starting to look a little bit better than it was. And then I add something else in, like a super light colour, because of the way that the sunlight was hitting, it did make her lips look more dewy. And there I am just erasing the rest of the blur that's sort of spread out from where I wanted it to be. So I'm just cleaning up the shot there and just making sure the colour is contained to the bottom lip only. Okay, so there you can see the details. They're really quite subtle in terms of the nostril and the eyelid and the eyebrows, but I did do quite a lot with the lips, so I think you can probably tell. I hope. Like I said, it's all really subtle differences. And here I'm adding in a much darker pencil line to the eyebrow because I wanted it to look a little bit fuller over there, and I wanted, again, like I said before, my photo has quite a lot of grain on it, so it does take away from the clarity, and I just wanted to bring a little bit of clarity back, so that's why I decided to add some new bits and pieces in. And I think I put the pixel onto 1 for this pencil, and it does look really strange at first, and I just sort of blur it a little bit, and then it makes it look more natural. So here I'm just adding in more crack details as well, but I actually started to darken it, because when I go to blur it and then bring the opacity down, I found that it was making it too light. So this way I found that it was a bit of a better colour match. There we go. Yep, so those are the detail updates I've done, the changes to the hair, the changes to the lips, the eyebrows, and the eye colour, the eyeball. Now I'm just bringing out I'm not sure what that part of your eye is called, the pink bit in your eye. I'm just adding some more pink colour to it because for some reason it looked really black in the image. So I just bring out the natural pink colour, and I think you can see all the adjustments quite clearly there. And I merge that layer. So that is with the skin and that is with the details. And I just kind of go back and forth a little bit so you can see it better, and that's all merged now because I'm happy with the final result. And then I save that into a new folder called Retouch, so I still keep my original edit. And then what I do is I export it to my camera, and I go into the Afterlight app and I add in a grain, because when I was doing all the edits in Photoshop, it took away the grain on the face but left it everywhere else. So I go in and use that on Afterlight and then just tweak a couple more adjustments, things like brightness and contrast, etc. Sometimes I'll use the textures that they have on Afterlight. I've used them in the past before and find them really good. The only thing is that they're quite limited in what they can offer you, and they're really popular as well. So I think when you see a texture on Instagram, you can often tell straight away that it's been used from Afterlight. Especially the one where it's kind of halfway, like got a halfway split down the middle. Yeah, so I'm just playing around here. This is the final stage of editing that I'll do. I don't think I really use Instagram editing. So here I've got the raw photo, and then next up I've got the edit. This is when I've exported it from Lightroom. And then I've got the original retouch, which I exported from Photoshop. And finally we've got the final edit, which is exported from Afterlight. And I'll do some close-up details of the raw and of the retouch so you can compare, and then just let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have any tips or advice for me or anything that you found unclear, please comment down below so I can make another video about it. If you want to see more content, click subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and comment down below what you think. You can also follow me on Instagram at AmyJRobinson_. Thanks very much for watching now. Bye!